Ethan Walker was dying on a Chicago sidewalk, and nobody noticed. The 35-year-old tech mogul had just watched his company's biggest deal collapse in a single afternoon. His father was in the hospital, fighting for his life after a sudden heart attack. And now, after months of sleepless nights and relentless pressure, Ethan's own body was finally giving out. The world spun, his vision blurred. Then came the cold, unyielding pavement. People hurried past him. Some glanced over, but nobody stopped. Just another man in a suit, sprawled on the ground, probably drunk or high. Not their problem. But a 7-year-old girl saw something else. Lila Monroe was chasing pigeons in the park when she heard the thud of a body hitting the ground. Her green eyes widened as she saw the man collapse. Without a second thought, her small legs carried her across the grass. Her yellow sundress fluttered as she knelt beside the stranger, her heart racing but her hand steady. "Mister? Mister, can you hear me?" She pressed her tiny hand to his chest. He was breathing. That was good. Her mom had taught her that breathing was the most important thing. With trembling but determined fingers, Lila picked up the man's phone and dialed 911. "There's a man on the ground and he won't wake up. Please send help." What Lila didn't know was that she had just saved the life of Ethan Walker, a millionaire CEO. And what Ethan didn't know yet was that this brave little girl with green eyes and a yellow dress was his daughter. The daughter he never knew existed. The daughter born from one unforgettable night 7 years ago with a woman named Harper, who he thought was lost to him forever. But destiny had other plans. And it all began when a child decided a stranger was worth saving. The morning mist clung to the glass facade of Barton Innovations, casting a silvery veil over the city's awakening pulse. 7-year-old Dorothy Cromwell stood at the base of the 40-story building, her small fingers clutching a wrinkled envelope to her chest. Her golden hair shimmered in the filtered sunlight, and her blue eyes, so startlingly bright, were fixed on revolving doors. She took a breath, steadying herself, and stepped inside. The lobby was a world of marble and glass, echoing with the click of expensive shoes and the low hum of ambition. Dorothy's sneakers squeaked as she crossed the floor, drawing a few curious glances. She approached the reception desk, where a woman in a navy blazer and perfect auburn hair sat behind computer. "Excuse me, ma'am," Dorothy said, her voice barely above a whisper. The receptionist, Linda, looked up, surprised. "Are you lost, sweetheart?" Dorothy shook her head, curls bouncing. "No, ma'am. I need to give this letter to the most important man here. My mommy said it's very, very important." She held up the envelope, her hands trembling. Linda hesitated, reading the name, Kevin Barton, CEO, urgent and personal. Something in Dorothy's voice, the way she clung to the letter, made Linda's heart ache. Against protocol, she picked up the phone and dialed the executive floor. 40 stories above, Kevin Barton sat in his office, surrounded by the trappings of success, awards, city views, and a desk that seemed to stretch for miles. He was reviewing quarterly reports when the call came. "Mr. Barton, there's a little girl here who insists on seeing you. She says it's urgent." Kevin's first instinct was to refuse, but something in Linda's voice made him pause. "Send her up," he said, curiosity piqued. The elevator ride felt endless to Dorothy. When the doors opened, she stepped into a world of luxury. Persian rugs, art on the walls, and a silence that felt heavy. Linda led her to a pair of imposing doors. "He's very busy, but be brave," she whispered. Dorothy nodded, squared her shoulders, and knocked. "Come in," a deep voice called. Kevin looked up, expecting a problem, not a child. For a moment, he simply stared. The girl's eyes were the same shade of blue as his own. She approached, holding out the envelope with both hands. "My mommy wrote this for you. She said you have to read it right now." Kevin took the letter, noticing the elegant but shaky handwriting. As he opened it, a faint scent of lavender drifted up, a scent he hadn't smelled in years. The words inside made his world tilt. "My dearest Kevin, if you're reading this, it means my daughter found you. I am dying, Kevin. I have only months left. Our daughter, Dorothy, needs you. I know you believe you could never have children, but the doctors were wrong. She is yours. Please, for her sake, don't turn her away. She needs a father. I have no one else to turn to. With love, Nancy." Kevin's hands trembled. He looked at Dorothy, seeing himself in her features. "How old are you?" he asked softly. 7. "I'll be 8 in December," she replied. The timeline fit. The resemblance was undeniable. But Kevin's mind raced with doubts. He'd been told he was sterile. Could it be true? Before he could speak, the door burst open. Susan Osborne, his girlfriend, entered, her eyes darting between Kevin and Dorothy. "Who is this?" she demanded. Kevin stood, the letter still in his hand. "This is Dorothy. Her mother says she's my daughter." Susan's face paled. "That's impossible. Kevin, you can't have children. Remember?" Kevin ignored her, kneeling beside Dorothy. "Is your mommy very sick?" he asked. Dorothy nodded, her voice trembling. "She gets tired a lot. She cries when she thinks I'm asleep. The doctors say she needs medicine, but we can't pay for it." Kevin's heart broke. He turned to Susan. "Cancel my meetings. I'm taking Dorothy home." The drive to Dorothy's apartment was quiet. Kevin's mind spun with questions, but Dorothy's directions were clear. The building was old but clean, filled with signs of care. Inside, Nancy waited, frail but beautiful, her eyes lighting up when she saw Dorothy, and then Kevin. "Hello, Kevin," she whispered. He could barely speak. "I got your letter." Nancy explained everything. The diagnosis, the years apart, the truth about Dorothy. Kevin listened, torn between hope and disbelief. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked. "I tried," Nancy said, tears in her eyes. "But you wouldn't see me. You believed I betrayed you." Kevin's anger faded, replaced by regret. He promised to help, to pay for Nancy's treatment, and to be there for Dorothy, no matter what the DNA test revealed. The next days were a blur of hospital visits, tests, and quiet moments. Kevin found himself drawn to Dorothy's kindness, her resilience, her hope. When the DNA results finally arrived, Kevin's heart pounded as he opened the envelope. Probability of paternity, 99.99%. He was Dorothy's father. Tears filled his eyes as he hugged his daughter for the first time, promising never to leave her again. Nancy, watching them, smiled through her tears. For the first time in years, hope filled their tiny apartment. But not everyone was happy. Susan, desperate and angry, tried to sabotage their happiness, but the truth could not be denied. Kevin ended things with her, choosing his newfound family over the cold comfort of ambition. As Nancy's health improved with treatment, Kevin moved her and Dorothy into his home. Laughter and love replaced loneliness and regret. On a quiet evening, Kevin knelt before Nancy, Dorothy at his side, and asked her to marry him. "Yes," Nancy whispered, her voice full of joy. Their wedding was small but perfect, with Dorothy as a flower girl, her blue eyes shining with happiness. As they exchanged vows, Kevin knew that a single letter had changed everything, had given him the family he never thought he'd have. And as the sun set over the city, Dorothy hugged her parents tight, knowing that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is deliver a letter and believe in love. The days that followed were a whirlwind of change, each one bringing new challenges and unexpected moments of tenderness. Kevin, once a man who measures life in quarterly reports and market shares, now found himself learning the rhythms of a very different world. A world of hospital corridors, children's laughter, and the quiet courage of a woman he had never truly stopped loving. Nancy's apartment was small, but filled with warmth. The walls were decorated with Dorothy's drawings, crayon rainbows, stick figure families, and hopeful messages scrawled in the child's careful hand. Kevin noticed how Dorothy always seemed to hover near her mother, watching for signs of fatigue, ready to fetch a glass of water or a favorite blanket, without being asked. The roles in this home had shifted. The child had become the caretaker, and the mother, though fiercely protective, was growing weaker by the day. Kevin's presence was both a comfort and a disruption. Dorothy watched him with a mixture of awe and uncertainty, as if she were afraid he might vanish if she blinked. Nancy, for her part, tried to maintain a sense of normalcy, but Kevin could see the fear in her eyes each time she glanced at the calendar or checked her phone for messages from the hospital. One evening, as the three of them sat together on the worn sofa, Dorothy curled up between her parents, Kevin asked. "What do you want to be when you grow up, Dorothy?" She thought for a moment, her brow furrowing in concentration. "I want to be a doctor, so I can help people like Mommy. And maybe I can help you too, Daddy." The word Daddy caught Kevin off guard. He felt a lump rise in his throat, and for a moment he couldn't speak. Nancy reached over and squeezed his hand, her touch gentle but steady. "You'd make a wonderful doctor," Kevin managed, his voice thick with emotion. As Nancy's treatment began, Kevin took on more responsibility. He drove Dorothy to school, packed her lunches, and learned the names of her favorite stuffed animals. He sat beside Nancy during her chemotherapy sessions, reading aloud from her favorite books or simply holding her hand in silence. The hospital staff quickly grew accustomed to seeing the tall, impeccably dressed CEO in their waiting rooms, his laptop open but his attention always on the two women who had become his world. But outside their small circle, the world was less forgiving. News of Kevin's sudden involvement with Nancy and Dorothy spread quickly through the company. Whispers followed him in the hallways, and Susan's absence was noted with raised eyebrows and knowing glances. Some speculated that Kevin had lost his edge, that the once untouchable executive was now distracted by personal drama. Kevin ignored the gossip. For the first time in years, he felt alive, terrified, yes, but also hopeful. He poured his energy into Nancy's care, determined to give her every chance at recovery. He hired the best doctors, arranged for private nurses, and transformed his penthouse into a home filled with light and laughter. Dorothy blossomed in this new environment. She made friends at her new school, brought home stories of playground adventures, and filled the apartment with music and laughter. Kevin marveled at her resilience, her ability to find joy even in the midst of uncertainty. But not all was well. Susan, feeling betrayed and desperate, began to plot her return. She reached out to old contacts, searching for any leverage she could use against Nancy. She dug through company records, looking for evidence of impropriety, and even hired a private investigator to follow Kevin's every move. One afternoon, as Kevin was leaving the hospital, he found Susan waiting for him in the parking lot. She was dressed in her usual designer clothes, but her eyes were hard and cold. "We need to talk," she said, her voice clipped. Kevin sighed, already weary. "There's nothing left to say, Susan." She stepped closer, her expression fierce. "You're making a mistake. That woman, she's using you. She's always been a manipulator. You're throwing away everything we built together for a fantasy." Kevin shook his head. "You don't know her. You never did." Susan's lips curled into a sneer. "I know enough, and I know you're not thinking clearly. If you keep this up, you'll lose everything, your company, your reputation, your future." He met her gaze, unflinching. "If I lose everything but gain a family, it will be worth it." Susan's eyes narrowed. "You'll regret this, Kevin. I promise you." With that, she turned and walked away, her heels clicking against the pavement like a warning. Kevin watched her go, feeling a strange sense of relief. For the first time, he realized that the life he had built with Susan had been a cage, one he was finally free to leave behind. That night, as he tucked Dorothy into bed, she looked up at him with sleepy eyes. "Daddy, are you going to stay with us forever?" He smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. "Yes, sweetheart. I'm not going anywhere." Dorothy smiled, her eyes closing as she drifted off asleep. Kevin sat beside her, listening to the steady rhythm of her breathing, and knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, he would face them with the two people who mattered most. In the quiet darkness, he whispered a silent promise, to Nancy, to Dorothy, and to himself, that he would never let them go. The weeks passed in a blur of hospital visits, school drop-offs, and late-night conversations that stretched into the early hours. Kevin found himself learning the language of hope and fear, of medical charts and whispered prayers. He became a fixture at the cancer center, his presence a quiet reassurance to Nancy and Dorothy, and a curiosity to the nurses who had never seen a man so powerful look so vulnerable. Nancy's treatment was grueling. Some days she was too weak to get out of bed, her skin pale and her eyes shadowed with exhaustion. On those days, Kevin took over, making breakfast, helping Dorothy with her homework, and sitting by Nancy's side, reading aloud from her favorite novels or simply holding her hand. He marveled at her strength, at the way she managed to smile for Dorothy even when the pain was almost too much to bear. Dorothy, for a part, became the glue that held them together. She drew pictures for her mother, made up silly songs to make her laugh, and insisted on family movie nights even when Nancy could barely keep her eyes open. She was a child, but she carried herself with maturity that broke Kevin's heart and filled him with pride. One evening, as rain tapped gently against the windows, Kevin sat with Nancy in the living room, Dorothy asleep in her room. Nancy looked at him, her eyes soft. "You don't have to do all this, Kevin. I know you have a life, a company to run, people who depend on you." He shook his head. "None of that matters if I lose you. Or Dorothy. I spent years building walls around myself, convincing myself I didn't need anyone. But I was wrong. I need you. I need her." Nancy reached for his hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "I'm scared, Kevin. Not for myself, but for Dorothy. If something happens to me..." He squeezed her hand. "Nothing will happen to her. I promise. I'll take care of her. No matter what." Tears welled in Nancy's eyes, but she smiled. "Thank you." The next day, Kevin received a call from his lawyer. "There's been some activity on your accounts," the lawyer said. "Unusual inquiries. And someone's been asking questions about your relationship with Nancy Cromwell." Kevin's jaw tightened. He knew immediately who was behind it. "Susan." He called Susan, his voice cold. "Stay out of my life. Susan. And stay away from Nancy and Dorothy." She laughed, the sound brittle. "You think you can just walk away? You think you can replace me with some dying woman and her child? You're a fool, Kevin, and you'll regret this." He hung up, his hand shaking with anger, but he refused to let Susan's threats shake his resolve. That weekend, Kevin took Dorothy to the park. They fed ducks, played on the swings, and shared ice cream cones. For a few precious hours, the world felt normal. Dorothy giggled as Kevin pushed her higher and higher on the swing, her laughter ringing out across the playground. "Daddy, do you think Mommy will get better?" she asked as they sat on a bench, watching the sunset. Kevin wrapped an arm around her. "I hope so, sweetheart. We're doing everything we can." Dorothy nodded, her expression serious. "I pray every night. I ask God to make her better. And I ask him to let you stay with us forever." Kevin felt tears prick his eyes. "I'm not going anywhere, Dorothy. I promise." That night, as he tucked Dorothy into bed, she handed him a drawing. It was a picture of the three of them, Kevin, Nancy, and Dorothy, standing together under a bright yellow sun. Above them, in careful block letters, she had written, "My family." Kevin hung the drawing on the refrigerator, a silent vow to do whatever it took to keep that family together. But as the days grew shorter and Nancy's treatment dragged on, the shadows of the past began to creep in. Susan's threats became more insistent, her tactics more desperate. She sent anonymous emails to Kevin's board of directors, hinting at impropriety. She leaked rumors to the press, painting Nancy as a gold digger and Kevin as a man blinded by guilt. Kevin weathered the storm, his focus unwavering. He met with his board, explained the situation, and made it clear that his priorities had changed. Some were supportive, others were not. But Kevin no longer cared about their approval. His only concern was Nancy and Dorothy. One evening, as he sat with Nancy on the balcony, watching the city lights twinkle below, she turned to him. "Are you sure about this, Kevin? Are you sure you want this life?" He looked at her, his eyes steady. "I've never been more sure of anything." She smiled, leaning her head on his shoulder. "I love you." He kissed her forehead. "I love you, too." Inside, Dorothy watched him from the window, her heart full. For the first time in her young life, she felt safe. She felt loved. And she knew, deep down, that no matter what happened, they would face it together. The autumn leaves began to fall, painting the city in shades of gold and crimson. With each passing week, Dorothy grew more comfortable in her new life, and Kevin found himself embracing a role he'd never imagined, that of a father. He learned to braid Dorothy's hair, to help with math homework, and to listen, really listen, when she talked about her day. The penthouse, once a cold monument to his success, was now filled with laughter, music, and the scent of Nancy's favorite tea. But the shadow of Susan's interference lingered. One morning, Kevin arrived at the office to find a thick envelope on his desk. Inside were photographs, grainy, poorly lit images of Nancy meeting with a man in a coffee shop. There was also a typed note. "Are you sure you know who you're letting into your life?" Kevin's hands shook as he flipped through the photos. He recognized a man, Robert Fitzpatrick, Nancy's ex-husband. The implication was clear, but Kevin refused to jump to conclusions. He called Nancy that evening, his voice gentle but direct. "Nancy, I got some photos today. Of you and Robert. Is there something I should know?" There's a long pause. "Robert reached out a few weeks ago," Nancy admitted. "He heard about my illness. He wanted to see if there was anything he could do to help. That's all, Kevin. I promise." Kevin believed her, but the seed of doubt had been planted. He knew Susan was behind the photos, but he couldn't shake the fear that he might lose Nancy again, not to illness, but to secrets. Meanwhile, Dorothy sensed attention. She became quieter, clinging to Kevin and Nancy, afraid that the fragile happiness they'd found might slip away. One night, as Kevin tucked her in, she whispered, "Daddy, are you and Mommy mad at each other?" He hugged her tightly. "No, sweetheart. We're just worried. But we love you. That will never change." Dorothy nodded, but Kevin saw the worry in her eyes. The next day, Nancy's health took a turn. She collapsed in the kitchen, and Kevin rushed her to the hospital. The doctors adjusted her treatment, but the prognosis was uncertain. Kevin stayed by her side, refusing to leave even when the nurses urged him to rest. Late one night, as Nancy slept, Kevin sat in the hospital chapel, his head in his hands. He prayed, not something he'd done in years, for strength, for hope, for a miracle. A soft voice interrupted his thoughts. "Mr. Barton?" He looked up to see Dr. Martinez, Nancy's oncologist. "I want to let you know that Nancy is stable for now. The new treatment is aggressive, but it's her best chance." Kevin nodded, relief and fear warring inside him. "Thank you, doctor." As the days passed, Nancy slowly regained her strength. Dorothy visited every afternoon, bringing drawings and stories to cheer her mother. Kevin watched them together, his heart aching with love and fear. One afternoon, as Dorothy colored quietly by Nancy's bedside, Nancy reached for Kevin's hand. "I'm scared, Kevin. Not for myself, but for Dorothy. If I don't make it." He squeezed her hand. "Don't say that. You're going to get better. We're going to get through this. Together." Nancy smiled weakly. "Promise me, Kevin. Promise me you'll take care of her. No matter what." He nodded, tears in his eyes. "I promise." That night, as he drove Dorothy home, she looked up at him. "Daddy, will Mommy die?" Kevin's heart broke at the question. He pulled the car over and turned to face her. "I don't know, sweetheart, but we're doing everything we can to help her. And no matter what happens, I'll always be here for you." Dorothy nodded, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "I love you, Daddy." "I love you too, Dorothy. More than anything." At home, Kevin found a letter waiting for him. It was from Susan. The words were cold, calculated, a final attempt to drive a wedge between him and Nancy. "You're making a mistake. She'll ruin you. Walk away while you still can." Kevin tore the letter in half and threw it away. He was done letting fear and doubt control his life. The next morning, he called his lawyer. "I want to make it official. If anything happens to Nancy, I want to be Dorothy's legal guardian." The lawyer agreed to start the paperwork. For the first time, Kevin felt a sense of peace. No matter what the future held, he would protect Dorothy. He would honor his promise to Nancy. As the first snowflakes of winter fell, Kevin sat by Nancy's hospital bed, holding her hand. Dorothy slept in a chair nearby, her head resting on a pillow. Kevin watched them, his heart full of hope and fear, love and gratitude. He knew the road ahead would not be easy. But for the first time in his life, he was ready to fight. For Nancy, for Dorothy, for the family he had found when he least expected it. The city was blanketed in white, the first true snowstorm of the season, transforming the streets into a quiet wonderland. Kevin watched from the hospital window as Dorothy pressed her nose to glass, her breath fogging the pain. "It looks like a fairy tale," she whispered, her voice full of awe. Nancy was stronger now, the new treatment giving her a fragile hope. She could sit up in bed, her cheeks tinged with a faint blush, and she smiled more often, especially when Dorothy was near. Kevin spent every possible moment at the hospital, balancing conference calls and board meetings with time at Nancy's side. The staff had grown used to seeing him in the halls, sometimes in a suit, sometimes in jeans and a sweater, always with a gentle word for the nurses and a protective arm around his daughter. But the outside world was not so gentle. Susan's campaign against Nancy and Kevin intensified. Anonymous emails arrived at the company, hinting at scandal. Tabloid reporters began to lurk outside the hospital, snapping photos of Kevin and Dorothy. One morning, a headline screamed from the newsstands, "Tech Tycoon's secret family. Is he being duped?" Kevin's board called an emergency meeting. The room was tense, the air thick with suspicion. "Kevin, we're concerned about the company's image," one director said. "This situation with Miss Cromwell and her daughter, are you sure you're not being taken advantage of?" Kevin met their eyes, his voice steady. "I know what I'm doing. My personal life is not up for debate. If you want to discuss quarterly earnings, I'm here. If not, I have more important things to attend to." The board fell silent. Kevin's authority was unquestionable, but he knew the whispers would continue. He returned to the hospital, his resolve hardened. That evening, as Dorothy colored quietly in the corner, Nancy reached for Kevin's hand. "You don't have to fight this alone," she said softly. He squeezed her hand. "I'm not alone. I have you. I have Dorothy. That's all that matters." Nancy smiled, her eyes shining with gratitude. "I never thought I'd have this again. A family. Hope." Kevin brushed a strand of hair from her forehead. "We're not giving up. Not ever." But the pressure mounted. Susan, desperate to regain control, hired a private investigator to dig into Nancy's past. Soon, Kevin received a thick envelope filled with documents, old court records, medical bills, and a marriage certificate. Nancy had been married before, briefly, to a man named Robert Fitzpatrick. Kevin confronted Nancy gently. The documents spread out on the hospital bed. "Why didn't you tell me about Robert?" Nancy's face paled. "It was a mistake. I was lonely, scared. Robert was kind at first, but he didn't want a child. When he found out about Dorothy, he left. The marriage was annulled. I was ashamed, Kevin. I didn't want you to think less of me." Kevin took her hands in his. "Nothing you could say would make me think less of you. We all have pasts. What matters is now." Nancy's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you." But Susan was not finished. The next blow came in the form of a DNA test. Susan had arranged for a test to be done, without Kevin's knowledge, and the results, delivered in a cold, official envelope, claimed that Kevin was not Dorothy's biological father. Kevin's world tilted. He stared at the paper, his mind racing. Could it be true? Had he been wrong all along? He confronted Nancy, his voice shaking. "The test says I'm not Dorothy's father." Nancy's eyes widened in shock. "That's impossible." "Kevin, I swear she's yours. There must be a mistake." Dorothy, sensing the tension, crept into the room. "Did I do something wrong?" she asked, her voice trembling. Kevin knelt beside her, pulling her into his arms. "No, sweetheart, you did nothing wrong. Sometimes grown-ups get confused. But I love you. That will never change." Nancy insisted on a second test, this time supervised by the hospital staff. The days waiting for the results were agonizing. Kevin barely slept, haunted by doubts and fears. He watched Dorothy sleep, her small hand curl around her favorite stuffed bear, and wonder how he could ever let her go. Finally, the results arrived. Kevin opened the envelope with trembling hands. Probability of paternity, 99.99%. He was Dorothy's father. Relief flooded him, so powerful it brought him to his knees. He hugged Nancy and Dorothy, tears streaming down his face. "I'm sorry I doubted you," he whispered. I'm so sorry. Nancy held him close. It's over, Kevin. We're together. That's all that matters. But Kevin knew there was one more battle to fight. He called his lawyer, determined to expose Susan's lies and protect his family once and for all. That night, as snow fell softly outside the window, Kevin sat with Nancy and Dorothy, their hands entwined. The world outside was cold and uncertain, but inside there was warmth, love, and the unbreakable bond of family. The new year dawned with a sense of cautious hope. Nancy's health stabilized, and Dorothy's laughter returned to fill the penthouse. Kevin, now more than ever, was determined to protect the family he had nearly lost. The truth about Susan's sabotage was about to come to light, and Kevin was ready to face whatever consequences might follow. Kevin's lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Evelyn, moved quickly. She gathered evidence of Susan's interference, emails, phone records, and the tampered DNA test. The hospital's lab confirmed that the first test had been compromised, and the chain of custody pointed directly to Susan's private investigator. Evelyn prepared a case for both the authorities and the company's board, determined to clear Nancy's name and secure Dorothy's future. Meanwhile, Kevin focused on healing the wounds left by months of doubt and fear. He spent long evenings with Nancy, talking about the past, their regrets, and their dreams for the future. Dorothy, sensing the change, became more playful, her drawings now filled with bright colors and smiling faces. One evening, as the three of them sat together by the fireplace, Dorothy asked, "Daddy, will we always be together now?" Kevin smiled, pulling her onto his lap. "Yes, sweetheart, we're a family. Nothing will ever change that." Nancy watched them, her eyes shining with gratitude. "You saved us, Kevin. I don't know how to thank you." He shook his head. "You saved me, Nancy. Both of you did." The next day, Evelyn called with news. Susan has been served with a restraining order. The board has seen the evidence. She's been removed from her position, and the authorities are investigating her for fraud and tampering with medical records. Kevin felt a weight lift from his shoulders. "Thank you, Evelyn, for everything." "It's not over yet," she cautioned. "But you and your family are safe now." With Susan out of their lives, Kevin and Nancy could finally breathe. They celebrated Dorothy's 8th birthday with a small party. Just the three of them, a chocolate cake, and a mountain of presents. Dorothy's wish, whispered as she blew out the candles, was simple. "I wish for Mommy to get better, and for us to be happy forever." As spring approached, Nancy's health continued to improve. The doctors were cautiously optimistic, and Nancy began to talk about the future. About returning to work, about taking Dorothy on a real vacation, about building a life with Kevin. One sunny afternoon, Kevin took Nancy and Dorothy to the park. They walked hand in hand, watching the cherry blossoms drift on the breeze. Dorothy ran ahead, chasing butterflies, her laughter echoing through the trees. Nancy stopped, turned to Kevin. "I never thought I'd have this again. I never thought I'd have you." He pulled her close, kissing her forehead. "We lost so much time, but we have the rest of our lives to make up for it." Nancy smiled, tears in her eyes. "I love you, Kevin. I love you, too." That evening, as they sat on the balcony watching the city lights, Kevin took Nancy's hand. "I want to ask you something important." She looked at him, her heart pounding. "What is it?" He reached into his pocket, pulling out a small velvet box. "Nancy Cromwell, will you marry me?" Tears spilled down Nancy's cheeks as she nodded. "Yes, Kevin. Yes." Dorothy, watching from the doorway, squealed with delight. "We're going to be a real family." Kevin slipped the ring onto Nancy's finger, his hands trembling with joy. They hugged, the three of them, holding each other close as the city sparkled below. The weeks that followed were filled with preparations, choosing a dress, picking flowers, and planning a small ceremony. Nancy's energy returned, and she threw herself into the details, determined to make the day perfect. On a warm June afternoon, surrounded by a handful of close friends and family, Kevin and Nancy exchanged vows in a garden overlooking the bay. Dorothy stood between them, her blue eyes shining with happiness. As they said, "I do," Kevin felt a sense of peace he had never known. The pain of the past was still there, but it was overshadowed by the love and hope that filled his heart. After the ceremony, as they danced under the stars, Kevin whispered to Nancy, "Thank you for giving me a second chance." She smiled, resting her head on his shoulder. "Thank you for never giving up on us." Dorothy joined them, her arms wrapped around their waists. Together, they swayed to the music, a family at last. But even as they celebrated, Kevin knew that life would not always be easy. There would be challenges, setbacks, and moments of doubt. But as long as they faced them together, he believed they could overcome anything. As the night wore on, Dorothy fell asleep in Nancy's arms, her dreams filled with laughter and love. Kevin watched them, his heart full, and made a silent promise to cherish every moment, to protect his family, and to never let go of the happiness they had fought so hard to find. Summer brought a new rhythm to their lives. Nancy's hair began to grow back, soft and golden, and her laughter returned, lighter than Kevin remembered. Dorothy thrived in the warmth of their new family, her drawings now covering the refrigerator and her stories filling the dinner table each night. Kevin, once a man defined by his work, found himself leaving the office early, eager to get home to the two people who had become his world. They took their first real vacation together, a week at a quiet lake house, far from the city and its memories. Dorothy spent her days swimming and collecting rocks, her cheeks sun-kissed and her spirit free. Kevin and Nancy watched her from the porch, their hands entwined, grateful for the simple joys they had once thought impossible. One evening, as the sun set in a blaze of orange and pink, Dorothy climbed onto Kevin's lap. "Daddy, do you remember when I brought you Mommy's letter?" she asked, her voice soft. Kevin smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I'll never forget it. Sweetheart, that letter changed everything." Dorothy nodded, her eyes serious. "I was so scared. But Mommy said sometimes you have to be brave, even when you're afraid." Nancy reached over, pulling Dorothy into a hug. "You were the bravest girl in the world. You brought us back together." Kevin felt a lump in his throat. "You saved us, Dorothy. You gave us a second chance." Dorothy beamed, her arms wrapped around both her parents. "We're a real family now." As the days passed, Kevin and Nancy settled into the routines of married life. They attended school events, hosted family dinners, and spent lazy Sundays in the park. Kevin learned to cook Dorothy's favorite pancakes, and Nancy taught her how to ride a bike. Their home was filled with music, laughter, and the quiet comfort of belonging. But the scars of the past lingered. Occasionally, Kevin would wake in the night, haunted by dreams of losing Nancy or Dorothy. He would slip out of bed and check on Dorothy, watching her sleep, her face peaceful in the moonlight. Nancy, too, had her moments of fear, worries that the cancer might return, that their happiness was too fragile to last. They faced these fears together, talking late into the night, holding each other close. They promised never to keep secrets, never to let doubt or pride come between them again. One afternoon, as Kevin picked Dorothy up from school, her teacher pulled him aside. "Dorothy is a remarkable child," she said. "She's kind, thoughtful, and wise beyond her years. You and your wife must be very proud." Kevin smiled, his heart swelling with pride. "We are. She's been through a lot, but she's taught us more than we could ever teach her." That evening, Dorothy presented her parents with a new drawing. It showed the three of them standing together, hand in hand, beneath a bright blue sky. Above them, in careful letters, she had written, "Forever Family." Nancy hung the picture in the hallway, a daily reminder of how far they had come. As autumn approached, Nancy received the news she had been praying for. Her latest scans were clear. The cancer was in remission. Tears of relief and joy filled their home, and they celebrated with a picnic in the park. Dorothy running through the leaves, her laughter echoing in the crisp air. Kevin held Nancy close, his heart overflowing with gratitude. "We made it," he whispered. Nancy smiled, her eyes shining. "We did. Thanks to you. Thanks to Dorothy." Dorothy ran over, breathless and grinning. "What are you talking about?" Kevin scooped her up, spinning her in the air. "We're talking about how lucky we are to have you." Dorothy giggled, wrapping her arms around his neck. "I'm the lucky one. I have the best mommy and daddy in the world." As the sun set, Painting the sky in shades of gold and purple, the three of them sat together, watching the world change around them. They knew there would be challenges ahead, but they also knew that, together, they could face anything. And in the quiet of that perfect evening, Kevin realized that the greatest gift he had ever received was not his success or his wealth, but the love of a brave little girl and the woman who had never stopped believing in second chances. The first anniversary of Nancy's remission arrived with little fanfare, but with a quiet, profound gratitude that filled every corner of their home. Kevin, Nancy, and Dorothy had settled into a life that felt both ordinary and miraculous. The penthouse, once a symbol of isolation, now overflowed with warmth. Dorothy's school projects on the fridge, family photos on every shelf, and the gentle hum of laughter and conversation. Nancy returned to work part-time, her energy and confidence growing with each passing week. Kevin, too, found a new balance, delegating more at Barton Innovations and making time for school recitals, parent-teacher meetings, and impromptu family adventures. Dorothy thrived, her world expanding with friends, hobbies, and the unshakable security of her parents' love. One golden Saturday, the family hosted a small gathering in the park to celebrate Nancy's health and the new chapter they'd begun. Friends, neighbors, and even a few of Kevin's colleagues came, bringing food, flowers, and stories. Dorothy ran from group to group, her laughter ringing out as she played tag and showed off her latest drawing, a picture of her family, standing together beneath a rainbow. As the sun dipped low, Kevin stood to make a toast. He looked at Nancy, at Dorothy, and at the friends who had supported them through every storm. A year ago, I thought I had everything: success, respect, a life I'd built from the ground up. But I didn't know what I was missing until a little girl walked into my office with a letter that changed everything. Nancy, Dorothy, you are my everything. Thank you for teaching me what it means to love, to hope, and to never give up. Nancy's eyes shimmered with tears as she raised her glass. To second chances, to family, and to the bravest girl I know. Dorothy beamed, her cheeks flushed with pride. To us, she shouted, and everyone laughed, echoing her words. As the party wound down, Kevin and Nancy sat together on a picnic blanket, watching Dorothy chase fireflies in the twilight. Nancy leaned her head on Kevin's shoulder. "Do you ever think about how different things could have been?" she asked softly. Kevin nodded, his gaze following Dorothy's joyful dance. "All the time. I almost let fear and pride keep me from the two people I love most. I'll never make that mistake again." Nancy squeezed his hand. "We're here now. That's what matters." The seasons turned, and with them came new milestones. Dorothy's first piano recital, her first sleepover, her first heartbreak over a lost pet. Through it all, Kevin and Nancy were there, cheering, comforting, and guiding her with gentle hands and open hearts. One evening, as autumn leaves swirled outside, Dorothy sat at the kitchen table, writing a letter. She looked up at her parents, her eyes shining. "I want to write to other kids who are scared or lonely. I want to tell them that things can get better, even when it feels impossible." Nancy smiled, her heart swelling with pride. "That's a wonderful idea, sweetheart. Your story could help so many people." Kevin knelt beside her, his voice gentle. "You're braver than you know, Dorothy. You changed our lives with one letter. Imagine how many lives you can touch with your words." Dorothy grinned, her determination shining through. "I'm going to try." As winter settled in, the family found comfort in their traditions, movie nights, baking cookies, and reading together by the fire. On the anniversary of the day Dorothy delivered her mother's letter, they framed it and hung it in the hallway, a daily reminder of the courage, love, and hope that had brought them together. One snowy night, as Kevin tucked Dorothy into bed, she asked, "Daddy, do you think we'll always be this happy?" Kevin smiled, brushing a kiss across her forehead. "I think happiness is something we choose, every day. And as long as we have each other, I know we'll always find our way back to it." Dorothy hugged him tightly. "I love you, Daddy. I love you too, sweetheart, more than anything." Down the hall, Nancy watched them, her heart full. She knew there would be challenges ahead. No life was without them. But she also knew that together, they could weather any storm. As the lights of the city twinkled outside, the Barton family settled in for the night, wrapped in the warmth of their love and the promise of tomorrow. Spring returned to the city, and with it came a sense of renewal that touched every corner of the Barton home. The framed letter in the hallway had become a family talisman, a symbol of courage, forgiveness, and the power of a single act of hope. Dorothy, now a little older and a lot wiser, often paused to read it before heading out to school, her fingers tracing the careful script that had changed all their lives. Nancy's health continued to improve, her laughter ringing through the apartment as she and Kevin planned new adventures. They took Dorothy to the zoo, to the mountains, and even on a trip to the ocean, where she collected shells and wrote her name in the sand. Each day felt like a gift, a chance to make up for lost time and to build memories that would last a lifetime. Kevin, once the city's most guarded CO, had become a different man. He still ran Barton Innovations with vision and drive, but his priorities had shifted. He left work early for school plays, volunteered at Dorothy's science fair, and never missed a family dinner. His colleagues noticed a change. He was still demanding, but now he led with empathy, his decisions shaped by the lessons he'd learned about love and second chances. One evening, as the family gathered for dinner, Dorothy announced, "I got an A on my essay about bravery. My teacher said I should read it at the school assembly." Nancy beamed with pride. "What did you write about, sweetheart?" Dorothy grinned. "I wrote about the day I brought your letter to Daddy. I was scared, but I did it anyway. I told everyone that being brave doesn't mean you're not afraid. It means you do the right thing, even when you are." Kevin reached across the table, squeezing her hand. "You're the bravest person I know, Dorothy." Dorothy's eyes sparkled. "I want to help other kids be brave, too. Maybe I'll write more letters. Maybe I'll even write a book someday." Nancy smiled, her heart full. "You can do anything you set your mind to." As the days grew longer and the city bloomed with color, the Barton family celebrated every milestone, big and small. They marked the anniversary of Nancy's remission with a picnic in the park, surrounded by friends who had become family. They cheered for Dorothy at her piano recital, her hand steady and sure as she played the song she'd practiced for weeks. On the night of Dorothy's 9th birthday, Kevin tucked her into bed and sat beside her, watching as she drifted toward sleep. "Daddy," she murmured, her voice drowsy. "Yes, sweetheart." "Do you think Mommy's letter was magic?" Kevin smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. "I think it was the bravest kind of magic, the kind that comes from love." Dorothy nodded, her eyes closing. "I'm glad I was brave enough to deliver it." "So am I," Kevin whispered, his heart full. Down the hall, Nancy watched them, her eyes shining with gratitude. She knew their story wasn't perfect. There had been pain, loss, and moments of doubt. But there had also been forgiveness, healing, and a love that had grown stronger with every challenge. As the city lights twinkled outside, the Barton family settled in for the night, their hearts at peace. The letter that had once been a desperate plea was now a cherished memory, a reminder that sometimes the smallest act of courage can change everything. And in the quiet of their home, surrounded by laughter and love, they knew that whatever the future held, they would face it together. Because sometimes, the most important things in life come in the smallest packages, and the bravest hearts belong to those who never give up on family. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this heartwarming story. Let us know what you thought of this tale full of emotions and unexpected twists. Share your name, where you're watching from, and rate this story from 0 to 10 if it touched your heart. And if you enjoyed the plot, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel so you never miss the amazing new stories coming soon. See you next time.